So I myself have been an executive leader, and I've worked in 7 different companies in 7 different industries in those 26 years. There is no guarantee whatsoever that just because they have been successful previously, that they are going to be successful this time around. So to look at the 5 C's, and the 5 C's are context, culture, commitment, circles, and confidence levels. The one thing I have come to appreciate in leaders, no matter where in the world I've been working from, is the quality that I call humility or vulnerability.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Startup and Scale Up People podcast. Here you can learn how people build their life, businesses, and how they run, their stories. I'm here today with Navid Nazemian. He's an executive coach. He has more than 26 years of as executive experience and plus 12 plus years as an executive coach. He has been working with companies and executives around the globe. He has multiple awards. And yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation with you, Navid. As everyone knows, my name is Mario Rivas, and I work in business integration and automation. And also I work with the executive community. So very happy to have this conversation today. Welcome, Navid.
Thank you, Mario. I am stoked to have this conversation with you today.
Well, I mean, to start a little bit, the conversation, to break the ice, just a little simple one, because you have more than 25 years, right, of global experience and working with executives, inside, outside, and also doing coaching. What made you realize leadership, not a strategy, is often the biggest constraint to growth?
Yes, so I guess I have collected my fair share of data points in those years, Mario. And funnily enough, what I sometimes describe my work as a coach to prospective clients is what I call the triple lens. So I myself have been an executive leader, and I've worked in 7 different companies in 7 different industries in those 26 years. So I had to lead, and I have been led as a result of those 26 years. Now, interestingly enough, I also happened to spend the last 20 of those 26 years in the human resources function, where I was often involved in promotion decisions, deciding whether someone gets to become the next GM or CEO or not. And if they are stepping up, is there any development that they need in order to fully own and occupy the role? And if it's a no, what's getting in the way, and how can we help those executives to have another go maybe a year or 2 down the line? And then the third lens that I bring to this is now, obviously, as a coach, I've been coaching, 350 plus executives over the last 12 years. And if you think of that, I have now gained access and insights into many more industries and many more levels of leadership as a result. So if I take a step back and look at it and think about what is the single biggest lever I see here for improvement, it's not strategy, it's not resilience, it's not all the fancy words that are being thrown around. By the way, it's also not AI, but it is leadership and the principle of leadership, which is a biggest challenge of our time, and at the same time, the biggest opportunity as well.
And for you, which is the main constraint to grow companies when a new CEO step in?
So this is a full chapter in my book where I look at the top 10 reasons for executive transition failure. But if I wanted to give you two or three of those, just in the short format of the podcast, the first one is what one of my mentors, Dr. Marshall Goldsmith, put on as a title of one of his books. This gentleman has written 42 books. I'm sure by the time we're having this conversation, he's probably written another book. But this one book has outsold all the other 41 books that he has written. And that book is titled, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, which is one of the more fundamental truths about, even though someone may have been a CEO before, there is no guarantee whatsoever that just because they have been successful previously, they are going to be successful this time around. So that's the first one. The second one is a statistic.
Let's stop there. That's a very important one. And I mean, I've been director of operations in big corporates and also CEO for a few startups. And I have performed very well, in some roles, and others, not so well, right? So I think this happens as well for C-suites from other like organizations in general, in every single role. Why do you think that some executives struggle to be successful after being promoted?
Yeah. So one of the issues I see most often at the senior level is the fact that because you have been successful previously and because you have in your own mind your own little playbook that you just pull out and think, okay, this is how I did it last time. It went pretty well. I might as well have another go at this right now. And that is one of the fundamental mistakes because, again, in my book, I gave to the world what is called the Double Diamond Framework. And one of the subsets of the Double Diamond Framework encourages the new executive to look at the 5 C's. And the 5 C's are context, culture, commitment, circles, and confidence levels. And so by going through the 5 C's before you are onboarding, what you're making sure is to look at, for instance, the context of the new organization and thinking about how is the context of my new role in my new organization different than the previous context where I have been, quite successful before? And are there any learnings I can transfer here? Or is this something entirely new for me? So I better have my visor open and really take in all the information for the first 2 or 3 months before I conclude. Same with culture. I mean, this is the biggest breakup for CEO transitions, which is they often come in with a big mandate from the board. And the mandate is something around bring about culture change the operating pattern of the organization, introduce new products and services and what have you. And because they have done that previously in other organizations, they just assume that that's the same principle that they can apply here, not bearing in mind that, if I give you 2 names, one organization run by Elon Musk, right? And the other organization run by Satya Nadella. Now, both are tech companies for what's considered a tech company, but the culture of what it takes to lead and succeed in one company versus the other is so fundamentally different. And if you came out with whatever playbook you have created in the past, you're quite likely to succeed. So that's the number 2 reason. So it's right down the alley of HR people, and we call this the soft skills or the lack of the soft skills. And as I say it as a byline comment, as a punchline on podcast, it's the functional/technical skills that gets you promoted into the C-suite. And it's the lack of the so-called soft skills that gets you fired pretty quickly on the back end of that. And then the last thing I wanted to share with you, which is the whole reason I started to do the research and write this wonderful book, is the fact that 4 out of 10 executives are a transition failure, meaning 40% of all executive transitions are not getting anywhere. And that this is a staggering statistic and something that really got me thinking about if I wanted to pick one angle, because there's so many topics you can, pick in the realm of leadership, which is my angle and what is the one I want to dedicate my next 10 or 20 years to?
Yes, it's well, obviously culture is very important, and the other factors that you mentioned as well. But since we have experience, generally they've been in different companies, so they know that they generally, that they have to adapt, be flexible, understand the context, and consider culture in the transition period, which is in terms of culture, was very slow. But I've seen this also changes. I walked into merge, and I was leading the merge between 2 3 organizations, and I saw how the board, the shareholders were pushing, to integrate, to make it quick leaner, and create a lot of chaos, to be honest. And in the end, the most successful stories are like very good leaders, very good with interpersonal skills, people person, very driven, of course, KPIs, governance, establishing clear business processes, and but the high impact one were the one that had a very effective leadership, I would say, increasing like 20% engagement, from employees, and that helps a lot to accelerate the transition. Actually, I'm making the link with what you were mentioning. It was like looking back to the stories or when I did this, merge, basically changing all the operating model, the culture, well, basically the reorganization. And very, very good point. So you I know that you wrote a book. The book, can you explain a little bit what the book in general, just for the audience to understand what it's about, the book?
Yes. So firstly, I'm happy to share a little secret with you and your audience here, which is I thought of this book to be a year-long project, right? I mean, what's the big deal? I'm writing a book about a topic I feel very passionate about and I feel decently knowledgeable about. So I thought of it to be maximum 1 year and then, we are good. Well, little did I know that, the kind of research and the kind of book that I wanted to write is going to be a 7-year journey. So that's just what it turned out to be. And that's, I couldn't find any other way to cut short the process of writing and the creative process of writing. But to give you an idea and your listeners an idea, so the book is titled Mastering Executive Transitions, the Definitive Guide. And if I wanted to look at the 4 parts of the book, it's 14 chapters, 242 pages. And the first part looks at the foundations of executive transitions. Where did it all begin? Why onboarding frameworks can be useful? And why care about the topic right now and what the true definition of an executive transition coach is. That then brings us to the second part of the book. This part explores executive transition challenges and failures. Here, we look at existing organization onboarding frameworks, what gets in the way, and what is the true cost of failed executive transitions. We will then conclude the second part with common executive transition challenges, which is what we got started to talk about right now. In the third part of the book, I look at how executives can move towards transition mastery. First, by looking at why getting executive transitions right makes a compelling business case, before exploring key interventions to make executive transitions more successful. So in the last 2 chapters of this book, I will introduce the double diamond framework of executive transitions, which is kind of my way of how to go about this. And the fourth and last part of the book is super, super interesting because, Mario, when I was doing the research, and at the time I was doing the research for my book, there were no ChatGPTs, there were no large language models or any such tools existing. So I had to use good old Google, sit down in front of a computer and do the hardcore research. When you were to type into Google at the time, the most effective way to onboard as a CEO or as an executive in your first 90 days, you would get at the time more than 5 billion search results. So this topic, the first 90 days, is like a gazillion times over researched and written about. And if you were to change the only word in your search, the word first with your last, you would only get less than 5 million search results. So that led me to look at the last and fourth part of the book and really looking at your last 90 days in an executive role and how you might want to be more structured, more thoughtful, but passing the baton to the person that is incoming, because only then it becomes a full circle. So the last 90 days in how to successfully executives can transition out of a role is the fourth and last chapter.
And I didn't get, is the book published or it's not published yet?
It has been published 4 years ago, and it's available in any and all available formats: ebook, paperback, hardcover, audiobook, whatever format you fancy.
And well, I imagine that you mentioned that you not only coach CEOs, also other type of executives.
Yes.
And across industries.
That's right.
And And after all this, because you said 350 plus, something like that. From your perspective, after talking with so many executives, everyone is so different, right? And what separates exceptional leaders from simple, competent managers?
Okay. So Mario, you want to go all in. I love that. Yeah, I love that about this podcast. Again, unlike my book, I have to give this caveat to you. This is not researched in the same manner. So I didn't spend 5 years researching what, highlights the most capable executives, but it's a great question and I will, respond to that in my own way. So firstly, I find that if I wanted to look at the qualities of exceptional leaders, I could think of 6 unique qualities. Okay. The first 2 qualities are confident and self-aware. So the leaders that are confident, and I think, I'm not using any particular names, but a very famous world politician comes to mind who has almost too much of confidence, but not enough self-awareness, meaning the look in the mirror and looking at how the messages are landing with the audience isn't necessarily strong with this particular world leader. So these 2 are what I call self-leadership. And where do they help the leader? These 2 items help the leader to expand their identity. Because if I have the confidence to make decisions, to win over audiences, and I'm self-aware, meaning I'm not always talking. I'm also taking time to listen. I'm taking time to take in feedback and listen to how my leadership is landing or not. That's the first 2 of the 6 essential qualities. That then gets us into the next 2. And these 2 are connected and inspiring. When I say connected, think of the Wi-Fi symbol, where no matter how senior you are, you may be the group CEO of the world's largest investment bank with trillions of dollars assets under management. And there is someone in the floor who is cleaning the office space. And you're on your way out, it's very late in the evening, and you're on your way out and you're able to have a meaningful conversation with that individual. No matter how senior you are, no matter how unrelated you are, this is what I mean with connected. And inspiring means really being able to speak to the individual as if they are the only person in the room. I mean, I myself, I get goosebumps when I think back of that time. I was a young student and one of my professors gifted me a ticket to go and attend a world leadership conference in Frankfurt, in Germany at the time. And I drove there and I got my press pass because I was writing for the university blog at the time. And when I got in, I was allowed to enter a press room. And there you had all the world leaders like, Jack Welch, the CEO of GE. You had Philip Kotler, the marketing guru. You had Dr. Stephen Covey, the author of The 7 Habits. And I got to sit in an interview format with Stephen Covey. And Mario, there were 24 press members. I was one of them in the room. When this guy walked in, he hadn't said a word. I felt his presence. When he started to talk, and there were 23 other people in the room, I felt I'm the only person he's speaking to right now. And that is what I mean with being able to connect and being inspirational at the same time. And so the point of these 2 is team leadership. And what does it help the leader to achieve? They enhance the impact of the leader. And that brings us to the final 2 of the 6 essential qualities. The first one is courage, and the other one is clarity. Again, I don't want to mention any famous world politicians who have a ton of courage, even start wars without having an exit plan. And then as and when things don't quite work out in the way they hoped, so they have to scramble back and find a way out of this. Now, the combination of the 2 is important, which means, yes, you have the courage. Yes, you can get things done. And you are bold and you are brave and you are going for things that have not been achieved before. But ideally, it's not always trying to land a man on the moon, because as we know, that's a big undertaking. And it takes a lot of effort and planning to make that happen. So these 2 are all about business leadership. And the point of leaders paying attention to this is because if you're an executive in a business, ultimately, it's all about elevating results and delivering value to the key shareholders. And it's the combination of the six that makes what I call extraordinary leaders.
I mean, a lot of people, I think, not a lot, but I would say like a great number of people want to improve their executive presence. And in my case, I'm starting, I would say, this journey compared with other C-suites who have been running massive corporations, right, global, right, with multiple boards. And what is an executive presence for you? And what people have to do to improve their executive presence?
So firstly, I want to acknowledge the fact that I do not consider myself to be an expert in the topic called executive presence. I just want to acknowledge that, which is different than when you speak to me about the topic of transitions. I could speak to you a lot about this particular topic. So for me, this whole topic of presence is one of the biggest myths that we have seen in the management world, which is, if I wanted to give you an idea of what I think executive presence is, it's about attributes or qualities that drives a perception that you are in charge and you are on top of it. And what it isn't is, it's not about a leadership principle. It's not about the presentation skill. It's not about mimicking a particular style or anything like that. And when I think of executive presence, and we can think of some world famous politicians, I mean, we can think of Margaret Thatcher or, Nelson Mandela. I mean, these are people that are universally agreed to have an incredible presence. And whether you want to call it executive presence or whatever, but the presence of these people is duly noted. And that's what I think is, a combination of three things probably. One, it's the communication and the style of communication. I mean, I give you the example of Stephen Covey. I could give you the example of Barack Obama. I mean, this guy starts talking and people will stop and will listen. And so it's really, for me, the act of communication is acting like a leader. The second part is about gravitas or poise. And that is really speaking like a leader. If you have been in those meetings in the boardroom where everyone is trying to capture attention and grab airtime, sometimes these are the leaders who just keep it quiet, but as and when they make a comment, everyone else goes quiet and starts to listen. So that's what I mean with gravitas and poise. And then the third aspect is appearance, right? Again, you can be appearing in not an appropriate format. That in itself will cost you a few tokens on your presence. So for me, it will be the three universal dimensions of what is often referred to as executive presence.
Well, yeah, executive presence is at the same that I'm not an expert, right, on this topic. But we've seen many executives how different they are, right? As you mentioned, the way of communication, connecting, talking, the vocabulary, how they dress, also their network. How important is their network? And what I've been in the end more curious about is for the leaders that are very down to earth and can talk with everyone. That I'm looking back to the topic that you were saying at the beginning, be connected and being able to being open to talk with everyone. And that's what for me, now that I have the podcast and I have this opportunity to talk with a lot of leaders around the globe, and I meet them in person, I became friends of some of them. And I think the ability that they have to connect and to share their experience and knowledge is one of the skills that I think that is very important for me. And that made them different. And I find honestly, I think this is a skill that not everyone have, because everyone's so busy that everyone don't prioritize connecting, sharing, and building bonds and connections. And that's from my perspective what I was thinking while you were talking. AI is changing how organizations operate, right? Everyone talks about AI. We know that AI is doing a lot of changes across different aspects. How do you think that leadership itself will change over the next 5 years because of AI?
Yeah. See, I was invited not that long time ago to give my idea around how I think AI is going to impact leadership. And when the host, who's a good friend of mine, invited me, I said, look, I'm not sure I'm the right person, because I see all these people who suddenly claim to be AI experts. I'm just an avid user, and I'm an early innovator and adopter, but I do not consider myself to be an AI expert. And he said, look, I'm more interested in your angle around what is the impact on AI on leadership than, on AI particularly. So that's what I'm happy to share with you and your audience as well. So firstly, I think it's fair to say that, right now, as we speak, Mario, today is the 29th of June, 2026, leadership is being rewritten. And when I say it's being rewritten, I'm not speaking about incremental change. I am speaking about the biggest shift in leadership expectations in probably the last decade. So CEOs themselves actually say that the role has changed more in the past year than it has in the past 25 years. And I think that's quite telling if you just hear what they have to say. And what I think is the shock that many of these leaders are going through is what I call the adoption shock, meaning AI is literally everywhere. I mean, I'm not sure whether you have seen those, but about 10 years ago, companies started to sell those vacuum cleaners that were essentially autonomous bots, maneuvering around your place and kind of vacuum cleaning the place and then going back to, their docking station to be charged and so on. And if you look at it right now, I think something between 78 to 82% of organizations are using AI in at least one of their key functions. And 94% or more are exploring or deploying generative AI. Now, although 71% already use it somewhere in their, business, the value of AI is highly, highly contested, as in, okay, show me the use case, how all this investment is actually resulting in something that you would not be able to find on your own and without the use of it. So that brings me to what I said at the conference, and I said, I think we are seeing what I would call as a leadership paradox. The tech is actually ready. So if you know how to leverage AI, if you know how to build large language models and you utilize them, they can be quite powerful. But if you look at what is the capability on the leadership side to be able to deal with that, I think that's kind of what's lagging right now. So a recent study that was conducted by McKinsey resulted in around 1% of leaders saying they are very confident in how they're going to deploy AI in their organizations, which means that 99% are having a big question mark as to, yeah, we are deploying it, but I'm not entirely sure if it's going to result in something meaningful. And if so, how best to go about making that happen. So I think the biggest barrier, isn't really the employees or the technology necessarily. It's leadership alignment and vision. And that's what I would say how AI is impacting leadership. It's revealing gaps, right? And again, 47% of executives in the recent study said that the companies are moving too slowly to adapt AI. And at the same time, if you look at the leadership capability and only 1% are saying we are very confident in our abilities to utilize this tool, then there is the divide, as I call it.
Yes, well, the numbers are quite shocking, and it's true. As I mentioned, the founder and CEO of Orchestris is a small consulting boutique and solution company. So what we do is we work with companies on AI strategy, AI adoption. Obviously, we go through data architecture, target operating model, and we help them basically to automate business processes, workflows, and And we have seen that, a few companies start using AI without having a plan and integrating new AI tools for everything. And then they have a bigger chaos, I would say. But the other ones who start with their AI assessment, AI maturity level, understanding how their data architecture, how they have to restructure the data, to enable AI to help them in a smart way. I think are the ones who are going faster. I would say. Because of the plan and the strategy and realize what it takes to get from 1 to B and C, right? And it's changing leadership in terms of productivity, I would say. More so, there are a lot of what I've seen, like C-suites and also boards are more concerned about how this impact on culture, because people are quite scared about AI. They think they're going to lose their job. So how they actually make these changes, this transition super aligned with the culture and from the human lens. So we've been helping as well on that, because otherwise it's very difficult, basically, to implement AI. So there are different angles, and I think that this means that the leaders are becoming more becoming techy because they have to learn, and then are also getting more connected with their people because of the technology, what is happening. Obviously, it's not in everywhere, but that's what I've seen so far. So I think it's like a changing a little bit the mindset of some leaders, and that's why I wanted to hear your view as well, because how you've been working in so many places, you have a lot of experience as well around the globe. I was quite curious.
Yes. So, what I have not mentioned to you yet, Mario, is that I have been working with a partner for about 12 months now. He's based in the US, as you would assume. He's like the tech AI guru expert. And what we have been building and is about to be launched very soon. It's technically not launched yet. It's in the beta testing mode right now. Is we are using VoiceFlow, by the way. We are building the world's first executive transition intelligence large language model, meaning we have been feeding this engine everything that's included in my book, every single one of the 156 citations that I have used in my book, everything I've ever said on podcasts, and today you and I are on a podcast, and this is podcast number 116 for me. It just in the last 4 years. So the transcripts of every one of these podcasts, every single edition of my newsletter, every single post I've created on LinkedIn, it's all fed into the engine. And with the support of Claude, what the user will get is their own executive transition companion, meaning if they're a leader, they don't want to afford me or they can't afford to work with me, they can still get very good advice, very targeted advice, working with the bot and kind of prompting it in a very normal way. It doesn't require particular prompting skills. It's even voice enabled if they wanted to listen to what I say. And they can work with it on their own to get advice and ideas and recommendations as to how to deal with particular situations during their onboarding and transition. So this is something super, super exciting. I have seen it live in action. I've tried an entire weekend to trick it into giving me wrong advice. I've failed. And now it's being tested by the 72 coaches that I have trained on my methodology, because they are the expert group. And I'm waiting for their feedback to make final tweaks before going live.
Oh, that sounds very good. Well, we have to have a chat afterwards, because I'm building a platform for executives, board directors and non-executive directors, and we can see if we can do a partnership there.
For sure.
And so I think, let me look at the time. Oh, we are just closing the episode, it went very, very fast. So the last question is going to be a little bit about, like the difference in terms of leaderships, because you've been working with leaders, in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, also in America. So what leadership traits are universal, and what changes across cultures?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure about universal traits or major differences, because for that we would need to apply a particular framework. I mean, the one that comes to me is the 4 dimensions of cultural with this gentleman, Professor Hofstede, the Dutch guy, who later added 2 additional dimensions to that. And so it's, things like power distance and many others. But without getting into the detail, I think the one thing I have come to appreciate in leaders, no matter where in the world I've been working from, is the quality that I call humility or vulnerability. I think, whether you're an American executive or a Middle Eastern executive or an Asian executive or a European one, demonstrating this quality that I call humility is a real art and something that actually speaks to your confidence much more than what is often considered to be charismatic leadership. So that would probably be the one that I would like to point out now.
Thank you, Navid. There is something else that you would like to say before we close the episode, and also how people can connect with you, and like if they want to work with you?
Sure. So LinkedIn is my only social media platform. I have a large following there, and I actually manage my own account, meaning if anyone were to send me a connection invite or a message, I actually respond to them. I have also a weekly thought leadership newsletter, currently subscribed by more than 8,000 executives. And this is my gift to your listeners and to your audience. If they were to sign up for my free weekly thought leadership newsletter, I will give them a free sample of my international best-selling book.
Great. Thank you so much, Navid, for your time, for joining the podcast. It was a very good conversation. I think we should have another episode in the future with other topics to continue exploring. And I will contact you in the next weeks to see if we can do a partnership between platforms. And thank you so much again. Have a great week ahead.
Thank you, Mario.
Cheers. Bye-bye.